Welcome to the Finding the Magic podcast, where books come alive. I'm Tricia Copeland, a fiction author and host of this show. If you love books, finding great reads, and hearing about the story behind the story directly from the authors, this is the place for you. Whether you like fantasy, science fiction, dystopian, or romance titles, I think you'll find something to love in my playlist. Listen in to discover something magical about a book or two today. Welcome, Tong.
Yeah, hi.
Hi, today I have Tong Ge with us. She is author of The House Filler and an upcoming novel, which is it a novel that you're writing now?
Yeah.
That we will talk about today. So I'm very excited to have you here today. Thank you so much for being here. Where would you like to jump in? Would you like to talk about your upcoming work or The House Filler?
Let's talk about The House Filler first because it's a trilogy. So The House Filler is the first book.
Oh,
So we kind
okay.
of need to start from there. Yeah.
Okay, and this is set in, I think, the early 40s in China, correct?
No, early 20s and 30s. Well, actually, it's lasted from 1920 to 1966.
Okay. Okay. So set us up, talk to me about, and I can't imagine you must have done so much research for this book.
Well, it's based on my grandmother's story. So while I was growing up, my mother has been telling me those stories like all the time. So I'm already familiar with it. Later, when I started to write this book, I, of course, did more research. I interviewed other family members and relatives, and also went back to China in 2015 and visited my grandmother's hometown. And that was pretty cool. Like I literally walked around the block where her house was once stood. And I also did tons of research on internet. Thanks to the internet now, I can buy photocopies of the newspapers published in the 1930s and 40s. And I also read a lot, both fictions and non-fictions, but mainly fictions. And I found that when you research on historical fiction, um, you can read books writing about that time period, but I think the best books is those books written during the period by the writers at that time. So they're more real and authentic, and they have lots of details. Like historical book doesn't have much details, right? It's just big historical events and significant historical figures. But if you want to know the details, I think that's the best way. So I read a lot of fictions written about like during that time, and that helped tremendously. And I can also find those old photos and pictures from internet. So it helped me greatly. Imagine without internet, it would be extremely hard.
Right, to set yourself in that time period and in that region and in those people's lives. But it seems like such a labor of love.
Yes. I wanted to be a writer when I was in junior high. So it's a lifetime dream coming true.
That's so amazing. And for it to be about your family's story, that must make it even more impactful.
Yes. Yeah, I think not only for me, but for my readers, and especially for those who not familiar with the Chinese history, like to them, it's really eye-opening. And a freelance editor I hired, she said that my books, like because I wrote 3 books, so she said my books changed her life.
Wow. Yeah. So I love this type of fiction. I'm assuming you're familiar with the author Lisa C.
Yes, I have read many of her books.
I
Yes.
love her books and I love just immersing in the culture and learning about that culture and learning about those people. I mean, she bases her books off a lot of history and historical facts as well. So learning about those people's lives. But tell us about the characters in your book, the families, and their story.
Yeah, the protagonist's name is Golden Phoenix. The book followed her journey from a very young age until she passed away. So she was born during the time that a woman's beauty was not measured by her looks, but by the size of her feet. So the smaller the feet, the more desirable. And for the parents, Chinese parents, they wanted to marry their daughters well, so they bound their feet at age 4 or 5. And the Golden Phoenix, being a motherless child, her foot bending process delayed until she was 6. And it was a bit too late. So she didn't achieve the ideal size of we call golden water lily feet, which is about 4 inches long. In Chinese, like they measure in Chinese cun. 3 Chinese cun is ideal. That is about 4 inches long. So her feet was 1 inch too long, and that's made it hard for her to marry a good husband when she was young, and also because she was trained as a seamstress and later become breadwinner of the family. That further delayed her marriage until she was 26. By then, it was too late for her to marry a young man. So she ended up marrying a widower who was 20 years older than her. And in Chinese culture, like we're talking about the old time, when a woman marries a widower, she's called a house filler. So that's where the title is from.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because she's filling the spot of the previous wife, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And was she his only wife? Because I've read multiple books where they would have multiple wives, or
Yeah, in this book, because the previous wife passed away, so she was the only wife. But
okay.
Before 1949, the Chinese law allowed man to marry like more than one wife. So they were like sister wives in some of the religion we have here, but it's the hierarchy is very strict. So all the later wives, or we call them concubines, they have to obey the first wife. There's a power hierarchy there, like no yeah, power yeah, is you call power hierarchy?
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, and that's often like a power struggles and backstabbing, and there's some Chinese books written about that, and it's pretty fascinating.
Right. Yeah. Lisa C has some of those elements too in her books,
Yeah,
though.
yeah,
Um, so more about Golden's story, though.
yeah.
Talk
Oh,
about.
so she married, and then she started she suffered in the hands of her in-laws, which was pretty common in the culture, in Chinese culture as well. But then her in-laws passed away, and she gave birth to 5 children, and had a short, happy life, happy time during her life. So then her husband passed away. Her husband was a builder, and he built this complex for the family. But when he passed away, then Golden Phoenix had a hard time to feed her 5 children because, yeah, she like way back when women usually don't go out to work. And then the Japanese came. Um, Japanese started a large-scale invasion in the interior of China in 1937. By 1938, they approached her hometown. So then one morning, her 2 girls went to school and never came back.
Oh,
And then they like before that, because of the poverty, she allowed her twin teenager sons to join the Red Army because that was a way for them to survive. And so now the 2 girls were missing, and she had her eldest son and also adopted son with her. Well, when Japanese bombed the city, they escaped in like during the bombing. So it was pretty dramatic and drastic. And she delayed until last moment because she was wishing she was concerning her 2 girls may return home. But it turned out that the girls were belonging to performing arts group, like children's performing arts group, and it was a rescue plan for the group. But they were not told until like they went to school. Then they were told that they need to perform for injured soldiers out of town. That's how the teachers got the group out without parents even knowing. There was no time. And
wow.
yeah, anyway, so it's pretty dramatic. And then later, her eldest son also joined army to fight in Japanese, but her twin sons joined the communist army, and her eldest son joined the nationalist army. And they were rivals. Like they were more than rivals; they were like enemies. But during the Japanese occupation, they joined force briefly just to fight the foreign power. But when Japanese surrounded in 1945, then these two parties and armies start to fight again. So there's a civil war following the Japanese, second, we call it second Sino-Japanese War. So, there's poverty, there's wars, there's a betrayal, there's a love, there's a heartbreaking, all these tragedies. And she survived that, but suffered a horrible ordeal during the Japanese occupation. And she also had a stepson who turned into a traitor, which means he worked for Japanese and it caused a huge amount of harm to her family. So the betrayal was at two levels. One is at the personal or family level, but another one is at the national level, because this person not only hurt her, but also hurt Chinese people by working with Japanese. And so eventually when Japanese surrounded, and then, after the 3 years of civil war, communists took power. And her twin sons, one, well, before that, during the when the Japanese occupied her hometown, one of her twins came back to her hometown and worked as a spy for the communists. And but after we call it liberation, so the civil war ended in 1949, and the People's Republic of China, or communists, they refer as a liberation war. And so now Chinese people were liberated. And but this son, Wu, was wrongly accused as a traitor and was put in jail and sentenced to death. And now she and her family, had to try to save this son's life. Then it was like that's the last part of the book. That's a climax when she and her daughter-in-law were on a journey to try to save her son's life. But meanwhile, she did not know that two of her daughters, eventually they went to a government-sponsored school in the mountain area, so hidden away from the Japanese. But one of the daughters, Daisy, came back to return home because she missed her mother too much and she was sick and she just couldn't stay in the school. They were like orphans, right, in the school. So she returned and also suffered in the hands of Japanese. But later she married. But after 1949, her husband was executed as a counter-revolutionary by huge mistake. Like, I wouldn't call it mistake. It was so in the 1950s, just after the liberation, there's a political campaign called oppressive counter-revolutionary campaign or something like that. And so Chairman Mao, the leader of China, said, well, I'm afraid there will be like 5% of bad guys. 95% of the population are good, but 5%, could be the bad guys. So at the lower level of the government, like a village level, the government officials, the cadres, they figure that the village head, they figure they have to produce 5% of counter-revolutionary. And that's how Golden Phoenix son-in-law was a nice guy. So this villager had said, well, I have a hard time to come up with 5%. Will you help me out? And he said, okay, I can do that. He didn't know the consequence, right? So he put his name forward. Within the first 6 months, everything was fine. Then there's order from above. All those counter-revolutionaries will be shot, like executed. So that's how her son-in-law died. So it's a tragedy, but it's also this resilience in the book. So for the first half of the book, Golden Phoenix was just suffering and take the punches and feel like powerless about her situation. But after she was raped by a Japanese soldier, she started to fight back. So she joined the communist underground, like the underground network, and worked with her son Wu, like side by side. So yeah, that's at the end of her life, her dream or her goal was to keep her family together, everybody safe and around her, but she never realized that dream. And that's why the second book came in. So second book focused on next generation, mainly her youngest daughter. And then third book is focused on her granddaughter, which is like second daughter is based on my mother. Second book is based on my mother, and the third book is based on my own experience before I came to Canada.
Wow, what a awesome legacy to have for your family. So the second book is about to come out. Is that correct?
Oh, haven't yet. No.
No.
I actually, in my life, nothing goes smooth for me. Even though my first book has won like 2 awards. One is called 2024 Independent Prize Award for New Fiction. Recently, I just learned that I won another award called I think NAWA. It's National Association of Independent Writers and Editors. I won for literary fiction, and also is a finalist for 2 other awards. But I don't have a publisher for my second book yet.
Okay.
I'm working on that. The reason I finished 3 books at the same times because I wrote a really big long book with 240,000 words, and I couldn't find a publisher, and I did not know why until later. A mentor of mine told me, "Well, the book was too long. You need to divide it." So I divide into 3 books. And but I think the second book, the first book, the opening chapters are pretty good, pretty fantastic. Second book, I felt is a little bit weak, but I did not know how to improve it until like just recently, just about a week or 2 ago. I read another book, and then the switch is turned on. Oh, this is how could I improve it? So now I'm, revising the opening chapters of the second book, and after it's done, it will be as good as the first one, but it's longer and richer because I know more about my parents' story than my grandmother's story.
Okay.
The third book is even longer and richer, because it's based on my own experience. So I'm pretty excited.
That is exciting. And so how fictionalized is it though? Is it like a little bit fictionalized or a lot
Yeah, a
fictionalized?
little bit fictionalized. 90% of the story in the book are true, basically. And I only fictionalized in terms of I have to do some characters consolidation and also some details. Also some like historical events we all know, but you need to know the details around that, surrounding that historical event. What average Chinese ordinary people react when that happened. So I did research on that, and it was so fantastic. Some of the thing I got from, like I wrote in a book, I got directly from the newspaper published at the time. I just need to make a little bit change, and even the report about the children's performing art group, I got that piece of news report from newspaper published at the time. Yeah, so it cannot be more authentic than it is now.
Right. That's
Yeah.
amazing. What amazing work. I'm buying it this weekend. I'm probably gonna read it all week.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Other readers has warned those who hasn't read the book, said, get a box of clinics ready.
Yes, I can imagine that. How is it for you writing it? Like, was it very emotional for you to write it, or were you able to detach a little bit?
I was able to detach a little bit because it is my grandmother, it's not myself. And I heard most of her stories. I only met her once. But as I'm writing that. Tell you something. Don't be freaked out. Don't call me a crazy lady. I in 2000, I started in 2004, and in Chinese, but then I couldn't continue, so I stopped and restarted in 2006 in English. But during that time, in 2005, my then boyfriend killed himself. So I went to a church in Calgary called the First Spiritual Church of Calgary. They're a little bit different from any other churches. They're into like a mediumship, they're like a psychic power and a healing and all that. So the first time I went there, I didn't know anyone. First time I went there, and they always each service session they have like a 2 mediums like standing on the stage and call out to whoever in the audience, your loved one is here. And that is the first time I was trying to get in touch with my boyfriend, but my father showed up, and he told the medium that uh, he encouraged me to finish the book. Like nobody knew I was writing a book. I didn't know anyone. And then my grandmother showed up, and but since then she always been there and try to tell me things. And she was a seamstress, but she was not an ordinary seamstress. She make opera customs for the opera companies, and so she embroidered like lots of complex patterns, and it's like artwork. So every time she showed up, she would show the person, the medium, her work. They always describe to me this old lady looks like a Chinese lady, right? Show this beautiful gown with the artwork, the embroidery, right? So she has been with me all this time.
That's amazing.
That makes me feel like closer to her. And also, when I start to write book, I realized how much hardship she has gone through. Like you appreciate that more, like her resilience and the toughness. Because I don't know if I could take out that. Like I really don't know if I could survive, but she did, and you appreciate that so much more.
Yeah, we do. And I think we don't know what we can shoulder until it happens to us, right? And
Yeah,
you talk to a lot of people, and how did you go through that? And they're like, well, you just keep doing
yeah,
the next thing. You keep walking forward. And yeah, it does take a lot of resilience and courage and bravery and the
yeah,
will to live and to see your family be healthy and strong.
yeah, exactly.
That's amazing. That's a really neat story about them talking to you and urging you on to finish your book.
Yeah, yeah. Through mediums, I couldn't talk with them directly. I know.
Right. No, yeah, no, I understand. But that's a really neat story that
Yeah.
gives goosebumps a little bit.
Exactly. But I believe they also watch over me. Like if you know them, you're not afraid. Actually, they're there to help you, to support you, even to guide you. It's pretty cool.
Right. No, I met an author one time. We were at a signing, and she was a medium. And I tried to stay really far away from her though, because I was not going to experience that at that time. But yeah.
It takes certain events for anyone, right? I think to get into that. But
Right.
But I do believe them. One time, sometimes it doesn't even need a medium. It's somebody, they have that psychic power. Like one time I was in a critique group with a few fellow writers, and I presented a short nonfiction about a sexual harassment case happened to me when I was young. And so I was pretty emotional when I was talking about it. And that time we had a newcomer. Like this woman, she was not a writer. She was not, she didn't belong to our group. She just, because anybody can drop in, so she just dropped in. She was once Miss Calgary. So she, really beautiful, tall, and East Indian descent, like like how do you call that? Like her heritage is East Indian, but she's like really beautiful. So she was there just listening. So after our session was over, she said, "Can I take you out for coffee?" I'm thinking like this is like 9 o'clock in the evening. But she said, "I really, really need to talk with you." I said, "Okay." So we went to next door in a restaurant, and she said, "I just want to tell you." She said, "I have certain psychic power. I just want to tell you. While you were telling your story, there's the old Chinese lady standing right behind you, and she want me to tell you, it's okay." Like she said that this, that compared with what she has gone through, this was like nothing basically. So that's the only time I met this woman. After that, she disappeared. I never see her again.
That's amazing. That's an
And
amazing story.
she told me, so she said, encouraged me, and don't be how to put it, like destroyed by that event, like emotionally. So yeah.
That's
So
really neat. So do you have children?
No, I don't.
No. Okay, I was gonna ask like how has your family reacted um to or your do you have brothers or sisters or is your mother or father still living? How have they
Well,
reacted to this?
yeah, my father passed away. My mother is in a nursing home now, and she has dementia, so she doesn't even know me now.
Oh,
Um, my I only people in my family, like my nephews and my nephew and his wife, they knew about it, but they don't read English. They just knew I published the book. My other family members or relatives, like my cousins, I have I didn't even tell them. The reason I did not because you know Golden Phoenix was raped, and in Chinese culture that's still a taboo because this is real. This happened. It's not fiction. So I don't know how they took it, even
right.
though they I got that information from one of my cousins. But that's number one. Number two, there's also a romance in the story. Like Golden Phoenix eventually involved with this young guy who was 27 a year, 27 years younger than her. So that would be a scandal by Chinese culture, not only back when, but it could be even like today. So I don't know. They probably would deny that it's a fiction, but they probably would think that would tarnish their grandmother's image.
Right, right. I can understand that.
Oh,
And
for that, yeah, I didn't.
that makes sense. Yeah, it makes sense to publish that as fiction too. So you
Yeah,
don't run into those problems, hopefully.
yeah, but because it's based on real life story, so they can figure out who, right? Everybody knows this about my grandmother, like in a family, they knew. So
Yeah. Well, if she was telling the story herself, then that kind of takes it off of you too. So
yeah, yeah, and she's very happy about it. Like when I asked her what does she think about the book through the medium, and she basically said, um, I'm like she's so proud of me, and yeah, something in that line. So proud of me. I've done a great work, and
well, that must feel really good.
yeah, yeah, and a likely response from an unlikely person.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So do you have titles for the next books? Or you think I love knowing what titles are going to
yeah.
be.
The title of the next book is called the Pinioned Bird, and the third one is the Dream Chaser. Is a working title. I don't know if I can come up with a better one. Like for now, these
Mhm.
are the.
So you were the dream tracer then?
I was a dream chaser, yeah. But this is called the China trilogy because it's all about China. Then my next trilogy will be about Canada and my life here as an immigrant. Lots of people like Amy Tan and Lisa say they wrote lots of immigrant story, and that is so popular now. I think some publishers they prefer immigrant stories than your own home country story because that is seems too remote, right? So yeah,
Right. Yeah. Well, I think in one of Lisa C's books, I think it was the one on the island of the sea women or something like that.
yeah, yeah,
I mean, it's mostly set in the past, but she just has a small tie-in to the present where somebody that was an ancestor or a grandchild comes to visit.
yeah,
So it ties in like a current day character, but only in a really small part of it. So
yeah.
that's interesting that you would say that they like publishers like to hear the immigrant stories rather than the historical stories.
Yeah, I felt probably an immigrant story is easier to sell than the things I'm writing. But recently I saw more and more of those books like similar to mine. They're written by second or third generation immigrants. For first generation immigrants like me, there's not very many of us writing books because English is our second language. It's extra hard for
I
us.
would think so, yeah.
Yeah, but second and third generation, they don't have that problem. But compare with us, I think um, they're more like distanced from the history and the culture and all that. So um, sometimes they make mistakes. And
Oh,
yeah, and also, I lived in China until I was 26. And I read Chinese, Chinese is my mother tongue, my first language. So I have so much more information than a person doesn't read Chinese, because they can only read something being translated, like fictions, right?
Right.
And so the information I'm exposed to is like so many times, so many faults more than theirs. So that's why I think my book is richer in terms of culture, history, custom, tradition, like everything. So if someone is interested in, let's say, doesn't matter which country, right? But it's, China, India, South America, like if somebody is interested in their culture and history and heritage, maybe read some translated books written by authors living in that country.
Right. That
So
makes
much
sense.
more authentic. Yeah.
Right. Because you glean the meaning, like even well, I live in the US, but even I grew up in the Southeast, and we would have phrases, and then we knew what they meant, and we
Yeah.
knew the meaning behind them, but somebody from the North or somebody from the West wouldn't even know that. Like we say, hug your neck. And I said that to someone, and they said, "What is hugging your neck?" Like, that sounds bad.
Exactly.
It's just hugging someone, but hug your neck. That's what we said. We're going to hug your neck. So it seems like, yeah, you can glean much more meaning as being that being your first language and understanding that language.
Yeah. And also I found that after being living in Canada for so many years, now I live in Canada for longer time than I lived in China. Sometimes my Canadian expressions slip through, like onto my book, my writing, into my
Right. Mm-hmm.
And then I have to be really careful about that, because no, Chinese don't talk this way. And it's so easy. It's so easy to. On another hand, I always need like a beta readers and critique groups, because something I take as a granted, like they all should know, but they don't, right? Then they start to ask the questions. What do you mean by this? What is that? I'm saying, oh, now I'm writing for English speakers, not speakers, not like Chinese. So that's why I have to use footnotes. I cannot avoid that, which is unfortunate. But once this book is translated into Chinese, I don't need all these footnotes.
That was going to be my next question. Is it going to be translated to Chinese?
I'm in the process of doing that. And I can write better in Chinese because it's my first language. And in terms of subtle, like little things, for example, I can use a local dialect for the conversation. I can distinguish between a village girls talking and college students talk, like the way they talk, right? In English, I can do a little bit, but not as much. So it will be better, but it also takes time. I'm just have zillion things to do right now, and I wish I could get that done like faster.
Well, it sounds like an amazing story. I'm definitely going to pick it up. Let our readers know where they can find you and your book. I love your website, by the way. It's put together wonderfully.
Thank you. They can find it on Amazon and pretty much everywhere, like Barnes and Noble and Walmart, Kobo, Indigo in Canada. But if they search my book on Amazon, they need to also to type in the writer's name, like Tong Ge, because Amazon sell other stuff. So if they don't, you'll get a whole bunch of household items.
Oh yeah, the house filler. Yes, that makes sense.
Yeah, so that's the only thing. Yeah.
Well, wonderful. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you, Tricia. I really appreciate the opportunity with your audience.
You're welcome, and I hope you'll come back when you publish the next book.
Yes, I will. Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Finding the Magic podcast. I'm your host, author and podcaster Tricia Copeland, and I love getting behind the scenes. If you like the podcast, make sure to subscribe and stop in each week to discover new authors and books. Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep finding the magic.